Okay, so let's start with a pretty uncomfortable truth today. Imagine you're walking into, a typical top-tier company.
Yeah, the glass walls, fancy espresso machines in the break room.
Right, exactly. Very smart people walking around with laptops, looking very busy. If you actually analyze the work being done in that building, how much of it do you think creates any real value?
Well, if we trust the data from our sources for this deep dive, the answer is it's terrifyingly low. In many major organizations, less than 25% of the work has any value for the end user, or the company for that matter.
Less than 25%. So, I mean, three-quarters of the payroll is essentially funding.
Motion, just
Yeah.
motion without progress.
Yeah.
It's what the authors of our source material call inventions rather than innovations. You see, an invention is just something novel, like, look, I made a toaster that talks.
Which nobody asked for.
Exactly. But an innovation is something novel that creates specific value. And this is the kicker. It has a sustainable business model. The gap between those two things is where billions of corporate dollars just go to die.
And that gap is exactly what we are unpacking today. We're looking at a hybrid method for innovation. It's this framework that combines the work of two absolute heavyweights, Dr. Curt Carlson and Dr. Alan Barnard.
Yeah, and to give you a sense of the caliber here, Curt Carlson was the CEO of SRI International. Under his leadership, they developed HD TV and, well, most famously, Siri, which they eventually sold to Steve Jobs. He basically took SRI from a failing institute to a massive revenue machine.
And on the other side, you have Alan Barnard, who is a leading expert in the theory of constraints. So we have a guy who built multi-billion-dollar businesses and a guy who specializes in finding logical bottlenecks. It's a really strong pairing.
It is. But, before they even get to their solution, they identify this massive problem right at the front door. They call it the corporate Tower of Babel.
Which is such a vivid image.
Right. Carlson points out that if you walk into most companies and ask 5 senior leaders to define innovation, or even just value proposition, you won't just get different nuances. You will get 5 completely contradictory answers.
Which sort of seems like a semantic issue at first, but I imagine in practice it's a complete disaster.
Oh, it's catastrophic. Imagine a construction site where the architect thinks a wall is made of glass, and the bricklayer thinks a wall is made of stone. They aren't just speaking different languages, they are literally building different buildings. If marketing thinks innovation means a new logo and engineering thinks it means a quantum processor, you don't get a product, you just get a mess.
You get a sink that doesn't fit the plumbing.
Precisely. Without a shared language, collaboration is impossible. So the mission of this hybrid method is to tear down that Tower of Babel. They propose a structured 5-step process. But it's not just a checklist. It's designed to stop smart people from making the single biggest mistake in business.
Which is jumping straight from a problem to a solution.
Yes.
I feel completely called out by this because if my internet is slow, I immediately just go buy a new router. I don't analyze the wiring or anything.
And often you buy the router, and the internet is still slow because the issue was your ISP. In your house, that costs you, $200? In a Fortune 500 company, that impulse problem, here's the solution, costs millions and burns out entire teams.
Right. So let's get into the foundations. Before we hit the 5 steps, we really need to understand the tools they use. NABC and the ProConCloud. Let's start with NABC. It sounds so simple. Need, approach, benefit cost, competition.
It sounds deceptively simple. But Carlson notes that he would sit in rooms with PhDs, literally the smartest people in their fields, and they couldn't answer these 4 basic questions. They could talk for hours about the approach, the technology, the specs. But they would completely fail to articulate the actual need or the competition.
And when they talk about competition, they aren't just talking about the other company across the street, right?
That is the most common blind spot. Often your biggest competitor isn't Google or Microsoft. It's the customer deciding to do absolutely nothing.
The do nothing option. That is a perfect segue to the second framework, the ProConCloud. This comes from Barnard's work in the theory of constraints. He uses this set of metaphors, a whole zoo really, to explain why doing nothing is such a formidable opponent.
This is honestly one of my favorite parts of the research because it deals with human psychology, not just business logic. Usually when we weigh a decision, we look at the pros of changing versus the cons of changing. Barnard says that's only half the picture. You have to look at the pressure not to change.
Right. He breaks this down into 4 characters for us. The pot of gold, the crutches, the mermaid, and the alligator. Walk us through this.
Okay, so imagine you're standing at the bottom of a mountain. At the top is the pot of gold. That's the upside of your new idea, the revenue, the efficiency, the glory.
And everyone focuses on the gold.
Always.
Yep.
But climbing the mountain is hard. You might break a leg. You have to buy expensive gear. Those are the crutches. the pain and risk of the change itself.
Pot of gold versus crutches. So that's just a standard risk-reward analysis. But then we have the mermaid.
The mermaid is the tricky one. She represents the comfort of the status quo. She is singing to you from the bottom of the mountain, telling you, it's safe down here. We know how this legacy system works. We don't have to learn new software. The coffee is warm.
And that's not just laziness, is it? Like, it's a real factor.
No, it's not laziness, and that's really important. The mermaid is logical. The current system works. It pays the bills today. The mermaid represents the assets you already have. If you ignore her, if you ignore the valid reasons people want to stay put, they will fight you.
So you have to respect the mermaid. And finally, we have the alligator.
The alligator is the danger of staying the same. If you listen to the mermaid and stay at the bottom of the mountain, what is going to come up behind you and bite you? Maybe the market shifts. Maybe your technology becomes obsolete. The alligator is the literal cost of inaction.
So for a true innovation to work, you can't just point at the pot of gold. You have to minimize the crutches. You have to kiss the mermaid.
Or at least bring her with you.
Right. Bring the mermaid along and prove that the alligator is real and getting closer.
You have to address all four. If you miss even one, the project stalls.
Okay, so that framework sets the stage. Now let's walk through the 5-step process itself. Step 1 is define the problem and importance. This feels like the step most people skip because they just assume they already know what the problem is.
The trap here is vagueness. Executives love to stand up and say, we need to innovate because sales are down. That is not a problem definition. That's a complaint.
Sales are down is just a bad mood in the boardroom.
Exactly. Step 1 demands you quantify the gap. If market share dropped 15%, you need to calculate the exact lost revenue. Is it $10 million? $100 million. This goes right back to the Tower of Babel. If the CFO thinks the problem is a $2 million issue and the head of R&D thinks it's a $50 million issue, they are trying to solve entirely different problems.
So step 1 is essentially getting everyone to agree on the exact size of the alligator.
Correct. And if the math doesn't work out, you stop. You don't innovate just for the sake of having a project.
Which brings us to step 2. Identify the conflict and the need. This is where the source material gets incredibly specific about language. They distinguish between a problem and a need. And I'll be honest, I use those interchangeably in normal life.
Most people do. But in this method, a problem is just an obstacle. A need is the specific criteria for a solution that closes the gap without making things worse in some other area.
The Nokia versus iPhone example in the notes illustrates this perfectly. Let's go back to 2007. I remember having a phone where I had to press the number 7 key 4 times just to type the letter S.
Oh, the T9 era. So the situation was that mobile internet was rising. People wanted to browse the web and send real emails. The problem was that the keys were just too small and limited.
So Nokia, being the absolute giant at the time, looked at that problem keys are too small, and they did what?
They applied a direct fix. They just added more keys. They built phones with full physical keyboards, which made the devices huge, heavy, and really clumsy to hold.
They solved the problem but kind of ruined the phone.
Right. They ignored the mermaid, which was portability and simplicity. Steve Jobs, however, identified the core conflict. He realized, to have infinite keys for different apps, I need a screen that changes. But if I have a screen, I can't use a stylus because it's too slow and people lose them.
So his need wasn't more keys.
His need was a solution that provides an infinite interface without the trade-off of a stylus or a bulky keyboard. That rigorous definition led directly to multi-touch. He didn't just patch the problem, he resolved the underlying conflict.
It's the difference between a patch and a real breakthrough. And that leads directly to step 3, the win-win solution.
And this is where Carlson and Barnard drop a very strict definition. Innovation removes trade-offs. If you were compromising, like if you're getting a faster car but it uses twice the gas, that's just a trade-off. It's not an innovation.
The sources list 4 types of solutions here. We don't have to get into the weeds of all of them, but change A++ seems to be the absolute gold standard.
Change A++ basically means you make a change that brings a new benefit, the pot of gold, while removing the negatives, the crutches, and keeping the positives of the old way, which is the mermaid.
The Nespresso example is the classic case study for this.
It really is. Think about it. Before Nespresso, if you wanted Nespresso at home, you had a massive conflict. You wanted the pot of gold, which is great taste, but you had huge crutches. The grinder, the tamping, the mess, the cleaning.
It was a whole ritual. You basically needed to be a part-time barista to get a decent shot of espresso.
Nespresso's solution was the capsule. It kept the quality, so the pot of gold, but it completely removed the mess and the skill requirement, the crutches. It was a change A++ because it broke the compromise between convenience and quality.
The notes also mention the upside-down ketchup bottle here as a visual metaphor, and I just love that.
It's a great litmus test for innovation. When you first saw a ketchup bottle standing on its lid, it was surprising, but then you instantly realized it solved two problems: waiting forever for the ketchup to come out and that gross, watery stuff that collects at the top.
It solved problems I didn't even know I was allowed to complain about.
Exactly. Innovation should have that element of course, why didn't we do this sooner? If your solution doesn't surprise people, it might just be an iteration, not an innovation.
But not all solutions are a change. One of the other types mentioned is when not.
Right. Sometimes the innovation is realizing that a rule applies in one context but not another. Think of traffic circles versus traffic lights. Innovation isn't always a new physical gadget. Sometimes it's just applying the right rule to the right context.
Okay, so we have a solution. Now we have to actually sell it internally or externally. Step 4 is yes, but planning. Usually when you pitch an idea, there's always that one person in the room who says, yes, but.
The yes, but person. The villain of literally every brainstorming session.
And usually we try to shut that person up. Or we just ignore them.
And that's a mistake. This method says you need to treat the yes, but as a design checklist. You want to turn yes, but into yes, and.
Give me an example of how that actually works in the real world. Because if a major retailer tells me, yes, but we won't buy it, I'm not really sure how I turn that into a yes, and.
Well, let's look at Nespresso again.
Yeah.
When they first pitched the machines to commercial offices and retailers, the answer was a flat no. The retailer said, yes, it's cool, but we aren't stocking these tiny pods.
Right.
We don't have the shelf space, and the logistics are a nightmare.
That sounds like a complete dead end.
It would be for most companies. But Nespresso took that objection and pivoted. They said, okay, you won't sell the pods, then we will. They created the Nespresso Club. They sold directly to the consumer.
Which ended up being the most profitable part of their entire business.
Exactly. They turned a blocker retailers won't stock it into a feature, which was a direct relationship with the customer. If they had just argued with the retailers, they might have failed. Instead, they used the objection to design a fundamentally better business model.
So the yes, but isn't a stop sign. It's a detour sign to a better road. Now, step 5. This is the one I really want to dig into because it completely challenges Silicon Valley gospel. We hear MVP constantly, minimum viable product, build it fast, break things, see what sticks.
And Carlson and Barnard say stop. Do not build an MVP.
Why? That is absolute heresy in the tech world.
Because words really matter. An MVP implies a product. It implies you are building the whole thing, just a smaller, scaled-down version of it. You hire a team, you write code, you design a logo. If that fails, you've burned cash and crushed morale. Carlson calls it root cause analysis on steroids. You're finding out why you failed after you spend all the money.
So what's the alternative they propose?
The MV, minimum viable experiment.
Distinguish that for me. How is an experiment different from a product here?
An MVE is focused entirely on the killer clause. You ask your team, what is the one thing, the one physical law or market assumption that if it's false, kills this entire idea? And you test only that.
Can you give us a concrete analogy for that?
Sure. Imagine you want to build a flying car. An MVP approach would be, let's build a car, put some wings on it, paint it red, put leather seats in, and see if it takes off.
And if it doesn't, you just have a very expensive, very heavy car.
Right. An MVE approach is ignore the leather seats, ignore the wheels, ignore the paint. Can we actually build an anti-gravity engine? If the answer is no, we don't build the car, we stop on day one.
The HGTV story from the sources really drives this home, I think.
It does. When Carlson's team at SRI was tasked with creating HGTV, they didn't build a television for years. They knew the killer clause was signal compression. Could you fit a massive high-def signal into a standard broadcast wave?
Yeah.
It was purely a math problem.
So they just did math.
Just math and computer simulations. If the math didn't work, the screen didn't matter. They spent their time completely de-risking the fatal flaw. Only when they solved the compression did they even bother with the hardware.
It seems so obvious in hindsight. But humans are wired to want to see the thing.
Right.
We want to hold the prototype in our hands.
We love the shiny object. The exact same thing happened with Siri. IBM was trying to build this massive, all-encompassing AI assistant, a huge MVP. SRI focused on de-risking specific impossible tasks, speech recognition and natural language processing. They just ran small, highly targeted experiments.
And that's how a relatively small team beat IBM by, 7 years?
7 years. Because they didn't try to boil the ocean. They just tested the water temperature first.
There's that great story in the text about Steve Jobs calling to buy Siri.
Oh, it's legendary. Jobs calls the SRI CEO directly and says, "Hi, this is Steve Jobs." The CEO thinks it's a prank from a friend and literally hangs up on him.
Yeah, right. And I'm the Pope. Click.
Jobs had to call back and say, "No, really, it's me. Let's get dinner." But the underlying point is, Jobs bought it because the hard tech worked. He didn't buy a flashy demo. He bought a fully de-risked technology.
This brings us to a really modern application of this method. We've been talking about human intelligence and team dynamics, but there's a fascinating note here about artificial intelligence.
This is where the structure of the hybrid method really shines. Because NABC and ProConCloud are logical algorithms, step 1 leads to step 2, which leads to step 3. They form a language that AI understands perfectly.
So this isn't just about asking ChatGPT to write a funny poem or summarize an email.
No. Barnard actually fed the strict definitions of these steps into ChatGPT. He then gave it a really complex problem about swarm robotics, a field he admitted he knew very little about himself.
So he used the AI as a logic engine rather than a knowledge base.
Exactly. He asked the AI to define the conflict, find the actual need, and propose a solution using that change A++ framework. And because the prompt was so highly structured, the AI produced a high-level solution that would have taken a human engineering team weeks to formulate.
That is a massive unlock for anyone listening. You're saying we can use AI as a high-level strategy partner if we just give it the right rules of engagement.
It completely turns AI from a simple content generator into a logic checks and balances system.
Yeah.
You can literally tell the AI, "Here is my project, act as the skeptic. Where is the killer clause?"
I love that.
Right.
Use the AI to find the alligator before it bites you. And the sources emphasize this framework isn't just for business or tech. They talk about wicked problems.
Right. Wicked problems are those massive social issues that feel unsolvable because every solution just seems to create a new problem. Things like affordable housing or food scarcity.
How does the method actually apply there?
We'll take affordable housing. The conflict is usually framed as build new housing versus improve existing housing. The con of building new is that it's slow, it's expensive, and it destroys green space. The con of improving existing is that there just isn't enough inventory to meet demand.
So you're gridlocked. You can't build fast enough and you can't fix enough.
But if you run the process, you look for the win-win. You look for the change A++. The example they discuss is modular housing. It offers the speed and scale of a new build, which is the pot of gold, but at a significantly lower cost and environmental impact, resolving the core conflict.
It really suggests that these massive problems aren't impossible. We're just attacking them with the wrong framework. We're fighting the mermaid instead of working with her.
That is the absolute core message of the research. Innovation isn't magic. It's a process. It takes discipline.
So let's wrap this up for you listening. We've covered a lot of ground today. We started with the Tower of Babel, the absolute need for a shared language so we aren't all building different buildings on the same site.
Then the foundations, NABC and the ProConCloud. Remembering that the mermaid, the status quo, isn't just an emotional crutch. It's a logical asset you have to respect and bring with you.
Then the 5 steps. Step 1, quantify the gap with actual math. If the numbers don't scare you, you don't really have a problem. Step 2, identify the conflict, not just the problem. Don't just add more keys to the phone, fix the interface.
Step 3, find the win-win. True innovation removes the trade-off entirely. Step 4, use yes but as a design checklist rather than a roadblock. And step 5, kill the MVP. Run an MVE, find your gravity problem and solve that first.
It is a really rigorous system. It takes the blind luck out of the equation.
That's the goal. You can never guarantee success in innovation, but you can definitely stop investing in guaranteed failures.
So here is our final challenge to you. Think about a project you're working on right now in your own life. Maybe it's a new product at work. Maybe it's just a home renovation. Ask yourself, are you building the leather seats before you've tested the engine?
And ask yourself, have you clearly identified the mermaid? What is the one good thing about your current situation that you are threatening to take away? Because if you don't answer that, you will never get up the mountain.
Really great stuff to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us today. Go find your alligators. We'll see you next time.